Welcome back to DLUXS.com. We're here with Dewayne Alston, CEO of Soul City Media Network, LLC, and Program Director for Soul City Radio. Thank you for joining us, Dewayne.
Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Yeah, really excited about this interview. Want to really delve into the interview here, man. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, man?
Well, I mean, you gave the most part of my title. It's kind of hard to say. I do a lot. I do the Soul City Media Network thing and Soul City Radio. I am also an editor for a local magazine here called Razor's Edge Magazine. It's a lifestyle magazine that is catered to the hair care and fashion industry. Basically, I do the technology section of that magazine. I also serve as the social media manager. I write for Examiner.com. That's kind of sparingly, though. And as far as my background, I studied engineering at University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and I'm not doing anything near that. So.
Wow, okay. So basically, how did your background really translate into Soul City? Because I know you mentioned you're a tech guy, and how did you morph or transition from your undergrad to Soul City? How did that happen?
Well, I would say if I had to take anything away from my undergrad in terms of doing what I do now, it would be just what I learned technology-wise. I've always been a technology kind of guy. I guess you can call me a tech geek, but it's given me the opportunity to be able to do most of the stuff that I would normally have to outsource. I can do it myself in terms of designing web pages, fixing broken computers, building networks, doing whatever basically I have to do in terms of the technology side of the business.
I see. What trends do you see? Being that you've done this, what trends do you see in technology and media then? Because that kind of brings a question to my mind.
Well, truth be told, pretty much technology is at the forefront of the whole movement, in my opinion. I mean, it's because of the establishment of internet radio and just, how people have taken to the internet and social media itself that allows for it to flourish the way that it has. I mean, I'll give you an example. Before this, if an artist wanted to get put on, he would have to create a demo, chop that demo, hopefully get picked up by a label, and then it will go from there. Now the artists have more of an opportunity to be in control of the whole process. I mean, there still lies the need for professionalism in terms of product creation, but in terms of everything else, you can pretty much do it on your own. You have, electronic distribution methods through aggregates like CD Baby that allow the artist to directly market their own product without necessarily having to get a distribution deal through a label. I mean, that doesn't hurt, but it's not 100% necessary anymore. Also, through social media, the artists have an opportunity to directly interact with their customer base. Before it's like the only time, at least from what I see, the only time an artist would have any chance to interact with, music lovers would be at concerts. I mean, which is still the case, but now, you can go to an artist's Facebook page, directly interact with them or, at least their team. You have Twitter. From my experience, a lot of artists are on Twitter themselves, so the chances of a music lover or their fans actually getting to interact with them directly through that are pretty high.
I see. Do you think that in this technological age and everything that's happening, and being that basically independent, it's a level playing field is what I'm hearing. And with this level playing field, do you feel like that there's some things that, let's take a major label, for example, and an artist, a typical old school scenario. the brick and mortar. Do you think there are some things that have been missed or lost that were positive from, from having that infrastructure in place before and now it being in the independent's hands and us not necessarily having the wherewithal or maybe even the business acumen and the budget, to make things happen as it could before? Do you think that it has really helped or hurt us is what I'm really trying to ask?
It depends on how you look at it. I mean, I can argue for both sides. I wouldn't necessarily say hurt. I think what happens is it forces the artist to have to learn the business side of the industry. Before, they didn't necessarily have to know that, because the label took care of everything. All they had to do was come in and record. But now, especially if you have an artist that wants to be in control of everything, they have to learn every aspect. I don't consider that a hurt. I consider that a helpful thing in terms of them because they gain that insight that they probably never would have had before. Now, on the downside, I mean, you have, labels that, they have established, especially the major labels, they have an established quote machine that's been working for all these years, and we're not quite, going back to what you said about an even playing field, I wouldn't say it's not quite even yet. It's getting there, but I would have to say that if the one thing that probably would be missed, and I'm not an artist, so I can't really speak on it directly, but I can imagine that not having that powerful machine, backing what you do, that probably will slow down the timeline in terms of, becoming successful, but I don't think it really hurts. It, like I said before, it just forces the artist to have to learn everything, which is not a bad thing.
I see. How do you think, because you have a successful radio station, you have a successful business, and, we have done work in the past. Actually, you had interviewed me before, and one of the things that drew me to Soul City was that it was so together, and the content was so robust, it was real. And the variation of artists and authors and the spoken word artists and what have you that you had, the variety was really appealing. So how did you bridge that gap? How did you really make that happen? And, you've been doing this for a while, so, at least a couple of years, but then, as I have been able to, what approaches did you take to make Soul City Radio so successful?
Honestly, I just tried to do everything the exact opposite of what mainstream radio was doing. That's about as simple as I can put it. And that's kind of, I say that because on a personal level, I don't like where mainstream radio has gone to. So I strive to do everything, like I said, I strive to do everything the opposite. For example, just in the way artists have to reach out to radio stations to get airplay. There's the whole payola issue, and then, there's just the hoops that you have to go through. I try to eliminate that. And I did that by trying to establish, relationships with the artist directly. That way, it takes the middleman out of it, and also, it lets them know that, I'm not the machine. I'm here. We're both, trying to accomplish a goal. My goal is to help you accomplish your goal. So anything and everything that I can do to help you do that, I'm willing to do. If that means, eliminating all the red tape, that's what I'll do. I mean, I find that it makes things simpler that way. And over time, I guess it's given me a bit of credibility, because artists know that if I say I'm going to play it, it's going to get played. You don't have to worry about paying me. You don't have to worry about, it being in rotation for a couple of days or something like that. Because once I put your music in the rotation, it's there. It's there forever. And You know, and that's basically it. You know, I just try to eliminate all of the redundancy and the bureaucracy out of the process, because it doesn't have to be that hard. I mean, and I won't say that I did this to try to establish a model. I would hope that people see what I'm doing and you know, start to do it too, because at the end of the day, that kind of direct business, you know, relationship with an artist can only help everyone involved. And it starts to work towards that level playing field that you spoke of earlier.
I see. That's a revolutionary concept. You know, it really is, because it almost, you know, how it lands to me is there's a definite, I guess you could say, quote unquote, spiritual component to that, because what I'm hearing is fairness, equity, opportunity, access, you know, and like an unfettered opportunity, once again, to allow individuals with a dream or a goal or a voice in some form of expression or another to really be heard. And that said, how do you make money at that?
That's a good question, because I have to be honest, like, it's not making me rich. You know, I still have to work and stuff like that, but I don't do it to get rich. You know, that's not my purpose. But my hope is that, you know, I can get some sponsorship that sees the potential in what I'm doing, and they see the progress that I've made, and they're willing to help me, you know, carry on. You know, it's kind of hard. I will have to admit that it's not the easiest way to go, but I figure if I can open the door and help bring something bigger to the table down the line, then, you know, I'm content with the job that I've done.
I see. What genre does Soul City specialize in, or is there a specific genre that Soul City specializes in?
Yeah, there's several. You know, basically soul, neo soul, R&B, jazz. I do some hip hop. I want to get into it a little more, but the hip hop is not as prevalent as the other genres. There's a sports show on our station and a news show as well. Basically, I would have to say that the idea isn't to necessarily limit itself to a genre. You know, the idea is to just provide the platform for, you know, the content. I say that because I syndicate a lot of radio shows as well that are produced by independent, you know, radio producers. So, you know, I still fall in line with my overall mission doing that. And, you know, it's really pretty much in terms of music genres, it's limited to those four. But I try not to think of it that way. Like, as a program director, when I get a new track that I'm listening to, I don't even necessarily try to, I guess, be the judge and jury of that. I kind of leave that up to the listeners. What I listen for is basically that there is a radio-worthy product in terms of production, not necessarily the song itself, but, you know, just because of it being internet media, the song has to have a certain level of production for it to play clear. And that's pretty much how I limit it to. But I hope that answered your question.
No, definitely. And you mentioned something there in terms of staying true to, you know, a portion to the mission of Soul City Radio. And my next question was going to be, what is your vision? What is the goal of Soul City? Where do you see yourself? I don't want to put a time frame on it, but, you know, to try to concretize this thing a little bit, where do you see Soul City? What do you envision Soul City being in, let's say, 3 years from now?
I see that. It's a good question, because that still kind of working on that. I mean, because of the way I started, like, I didn't start this with the idea that it would grow to where it is. So now that it's here, you know, I kind of have to formulate something for the future. So I'm still working on that. But to best answer your question, I want to see continued growth. I want to hopefully, you know, be able to have a physical studio where, you know, I could have, you know, live broadcasts and live interviews, things like that. And yeah, that's basically the short-term goal. The long-term goal is pretty much to continue, you know, what I'm doing, and hopefully it will just get bigger and bigger. And hopefully I could just, like I said before, I'm not looking to establish a model, but if establishing a model is what's necessary to change the game, then I'm willing to do that.
I see. Wow. Okay. We'll resume here in a few moments with Dewayne Alston, CEO of Soul City Media Network, LLC, and Program Director for Soul City Radio, after a brief message from our sponsor. Welcome back to DLUXS.com, an online magazine and network highlighting everything beautiful in the areas of music, film, food, and fashion. We're here with Dewayne Alston, CEO of Soul City Media Network, LLC, and Program Director for Soul City Radio, for the second segment of our interview. And once again, I want to thank you again for joining us, Dewayne, tonight. And was wondering, what artists have you worked with? You mentioned we talked about our vision and the goals and, you know, where we want to see ourselves and the organic approach as it landed with me in terms of Soul City Radio and your transition into the media realm. What artists have you worked with? You know, we mentioned neo soul and jazz, R&B, being some of the primary genres, though not confined to those categorically. What artists have you worked with?
Well, to answer the question, let me start with what I consider working with them. I do interviews like yourself. I haven't done any in a while, but I've interviewed a lot of artists, and some of the more notable people that I think people will at least know off the top. I've interviewed Steve Arrington from Slave. I've interviewed Paulie Carmen from Champagne. I've interviewed Darnell Van Rensselaer from Shy. I've interviewed Rhonda Thomas. I've interviewed Juno Joyner. If you remember him, he was on season 8 of American Idol. That wonderful rendition of, the name eludes me, but Hey There Delilah, which I really love that version that he did. Those are some of the people that I guess people would know. I tend to focus on the people that folks don't know. I think that's my mission in terms of interviewing. I like to, you know, break a lot of artists, as they say in the industry. But, yeah, my mission there is to mainly focus on, you know, getting people out there so they can be heard for the first time, hopefully. So, you know, in that sense, I've dealt with a lot of artists. Let me see here. I can name a few. I've interviewed an artist by the name, there's a lot. I don't even know where to begin. Coley Williams, Dion, Clinton Moore. That list goes on and on. I could be here all night answering that one.
Mm-hmm. Do you find a lot of hidden gems? You know, we hear a lot about, I mean, since it is so independent that you spoke of earlier, and since the access is there now, how often do you find those gems and say, man, I mean, these cats are hot. How come they're not out there? Or what can I do to really further their career? How often do you come across those gems?
I would have to say, I wouldn't say necessarily regularly, because I find now a few years later, like when I first started, I probably would say that I found more hidden gems then. But, you know, at this point, because the technology and social media has gotten to where it is, a lot of artists have established themselves to some degree by the time I find out about it, which is a good thing. But every now and then, I come across an artist that I've personally never heard of, that I'll listen to their music and I'm like, wow. As a matter of fact, just last night, I was introduced to an artist by the name of Jonathan Winstead out of, I believe he's from Kentucky. And, I was sent a couple of tracks, and as soon as I played it, I was like, man, this guy sounds like he should be, like, on world tours right now. Like, that's how polished he is as an artist. And, just doing my research, he's actually been in the game for a while. But he's just himself getting to the point where, he's starting to gain a following. And, like, that's where I find myself at now. Like I said, it's kind of harder to do it now because, a lot of artists, they're hip to the game now. So they're doing what they got to do to get themselves out there. So I can't really personally call them hidden gems. I'm sure there are just as many people out there that don't know them as people that do, but I wouldn't necessarily consider that a hidden gem. I just consider them, they're just at this point in their career. But, they're performing and they're cutting albums and stuff like that, and, they're selling albums, so whatever it is that they're doing, it's working for them.
I see what you're saying. Do you find yourself, because you mentioned about how the brother from Kentucky, he said his name is Jonathan Winstead? Winstead, okay. Let's take that artist, for example. And you mentioned that he sent you some tracks, you liked them, you listened to them. How often do you find artists today performing live that you've spotted and or wanted to highlight or showcase?
It's quite a few. Let's see, I guess there are a few artists that, I came across, a few years ago, and, I've kind of been following them since then, and I see, their progression now, and, they're now to the point where they're performing and, they're really full-fledged into their craft, and that's a good thing. I guess it's hard to put a definitive answer to that because I still feel like I'm on the outside looking in to some degree. I don't run with like clicks or anything like that. I mean, I don't know if that's making sense, but because of the approach that I take, a lot of the times I still feel like I'm on the outside looking in. So I don't really think about it. I just, I just keep moving forward. Now I'm to the point where before I had to approach a lot of artists and solicit their music, for the station. Now it's gotten to the point where artists are looking for me. So I don't know. I hope I answered that. That's kind of hard.
No, that made perfect sense. And I guess a caveat to that is, do you think that since we're mentioning about social media and the internet and the web and how things have changed, do you think that the web has compromised the performance of an artist at all, or do you think performance has gotten stronger from the advent of the internet?
I wouldn't necessarily say compromise. I think what it has done is it's allowed the artists to even get their live performances out to people. People that necessarily can't come see them perform at a certain venue because they may be in another state. With YouTube now, that performance is on YouTube, people can still see them perform live and still get the same. Well, I won't say it's the same because I don't think there's anything like standing in front of the artist, watching him perform live. But just seeing them perform and seeing, their stage presence through a medium like YouTube, I don't think that could ever hurt.
I agree. I agree. And the reason why I asked that, because, there's a whole lot of thoughts going through my mind. And, and I agree, in terms of, I believe that it hasn't compromised the integrity of the performance. However, I will say, though, that in my opinion, it does seem as if a lot of artists are more concerned with the packaging and maybe not necessarily as much as the product. Back in the day, and you always had to have good packaging. Don't get me wrong. You had to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed. However, now, we used to call them back in the day, and I'm sure the studio gangster, if you will, or the studio artist, and now it seems like with digital cameras and digital phones and HD now, that's really accessible to everyone and being so affordable, that a lot of times the edit, cut, and paste artist is kind of coming to the forefront. And when you see them live, you're like, wait a minute. They don't sound anything like what I thought they would, or even look what, I thought they would look like, which I think is part of the symptom of, being able to package oneself. And one can say whether you're an artist or not, just from a social media standpoint alone, it makes it really easy to package oneself and frame oneself in the way that they want to be seen, which sometimes is not necessarily the way it is, So I just wanted to get your perspective and opinion on that.
That's interesting. I never really thought about it like that. You're right, though. You're right. Now that you brought that aspect of it, I will add that what I also find is that a lot of artists, and maybe it's because of money issues, but a lot of artists are, they're taking those steps into their hands in terms of making videos, and they're using the technology, which is cool. But like you said, it kind of diminishes the final product because, let's just be honest, some of it just doesn't look professional. And which brings you back to what I said before. Despite the technology and despite the advances in it, as an artist, you still have to be polished with your whole presentation. So it's still. I guess it's a double-edged sword. You have the ease, and it does give everybody a shot at putting themselves out there, but it still takes money to make money. And that will always be, no matter how much technology advances, you're still going to need professionalism, and you're going to need high-quality production, and those artists are still going to be the ones that rise to the top. I guess that's always going to be the way it is.
I see. How can someone find you? How can we get in contact with you, Dewayne Alston, and how can we get in contact with, if an artist or if an individual wants to just tune in to Soul City Radio, how can we find you?
Okay. Where do I begin? Well, the website is www.soulcityradio.com. You can go there. You can listen to the station itself. There are links to some previous interviews that I've done. You can listen to those. Links to various sites. Just anything I feel associated with independent music is, I try to make it available through that site. Also, if you want to listen in through your smartphone, download the TuneIn app. If you have an iPhone or an Android phone, you can download the TuneIn app and catch us there. You can find us on Twitter at SoulCity_radio. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/SoulCityRadio. You can Skype me, Soul City Radio, no spaces, no underscore, anything like that. If artists want to submit work, submit their work, for airplay, the email address for that is submissions@Soul City Radio. For anything else, I invite you to hit up our station manager. Her name is Dana Bird, and you can reach her at Soul City Radio SM, short for station manager, at gmail.com. If you want to hit me up directly, it's just soulcityradio at gmail.com without the SM.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, brother, we're going to conclude with this interview now, man. And I just want to say in closing that, I salute you. I know your work. Your work is quality work, and I invite anyone listening to this interview to check them out. You will not be disappointed whatsoever. And if you are an artist and not necessarily just a fan or an avid music lover or art lover, then please submit some of your works. I would definitely testify and vouch for the brother that he is out there for you and out there for the people and the independents specifically. And his organic approach, can really be a feather in your hat. So, Dewayne, once again, brother, I really appreciate you coming on board and granting us this interview, man, and blessing us with your presence, man. I wish you all the best success, and I'm sure you'll be very successful. And, as a last little caveat to it, I think you truly are creating a model, brother. And I think that we all will be able to learn a lot from your approach, man, and your desire, and your passion for what you do. Because it's definitely felt that it's all in love, man. You really love what you're doing. I just want to say, brother to brother, I really salute you for that, man.
Thank you, brother. I do appreciate that, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. I was just telling my girlfriend earlier that I've done a lot of interviews, but I don't get interviewed that much, so I appreciate every opportunity that I get. And, I thank you for, I believe, I'm probably one of the first interviews, so that makes me feel even more special, that you guys thought of me first out of, all the potential guys and gals that you could have interviewed. So, I definitely wish you guys continued success. I've taken a look at your product, and I know you guys are going to be successful because you already got everything on point from what I'm saying. I'm just waiting for the magazine to drop so I could be one of your avid fans, for sure.
I appreciate that. Well, for our listeners out there, this is DLUXS.com. Our debut issue is April 2nd, 2012, 04022012. And we thank you for listening. Tune in next time to DLUXS.com. Thanks, Dewayne. Talk to you in a bit.
Have a good one.